Right, I'm back at the Tayanui stream and I'm here to talk about habitat, community, population, individual and niche. So here I am sitting on a rock, and the first thing that strikes me is all the green weed, or it's algae actually, all the green algae that is clinging to the rocks. So you can see it right there, right there. So these rocks in this rivulet or rapid, small rapid, are providing the habitat for these algae to survive. And if I had brought my nets and my collecting vessels and my microscope with me, we'd also see that in this water there would be all sorts of small phytoplankton and zooplankton. But if I ventured further out under these rocks, because there's lots of aeration going on, I would also see caddisflies, stoneflies, mayfly larvae, damselfly larvae, and at this time of the year even the adults hovering around on the surface. Those of you who are trout fishermen will recognize caddisfly larvae, dobsonfly larvae, stonefly larvae, particularly in the streams up your way, the Waiwakaio, the Waiongana, the Natoro, etc. Right, so that's the first thing. So a habitat actually is a specific part of an ecosystem that provides the ability for communities of organisms to carry out their life processes, that is, have protection, have shelter, breeding sites, places to raise their young, and protection from predators, but also provides them with their food. And these communities are a community is a group of organisms that lives in a particular niche or in a particular habitat that all depend on each other for survival, usually food survival. So these communities of organisms that live in these areas depend on each other, and it all starts with the producer class, these algae, the phytoplankton, the zooplankton, because without the algae and phytoplankton there would be no oxygen to go into the water, there would be no nutrients or material for the herbivores to feed on. So we've got the habitat, which is the particular location in an ecosystem that provides safe place for a community of organisms to live. A community is just a collection of populations that depend on each other. Further down the stream we'll talk a little bit more about that. A population is the total number of individual organisms of a particular species that lives in the area, and then of course you have the individual species itself. The niche is the role that the organism plays in the habitat. So is it a producer? Is it a plant that produces oxygen and undergoes photosynthesis? Is it a herbivore? An organism that feeds on green matter, plants? Is it a carnivore, first carnivore? Those feed on the herbivores. Is it a second carnivore? They would feed on the first carnivores, and is it a top carnivore? That would be the top of the whole pecking order in terms of feeding relationships, or is it a predator? And we'll talk more about that in detail as well. So I want you to understand what the difference between habitat, community, population, individual and niche are at the present stage. Right, here I am at a different section of the river. This is a slightly different habitat. Notice that the riparian foliage growing on the edge of the river bank is also a part of this habitat, because it's casting a huge amount of shadow over this particularly deep pool. The Tianuri River is known to harbour long-finned eels, branded kokapoo, large kokapoo, and the shaded area over there underneath the trees would be ideal habitat for them, because they feed on the eels feed on kokapoo and the other whitebait species, but the whitebait species feed on damselfly larvae, dragonfly larvae, stonefly, caddisfly, which they'd get up in those rapids up there. But they also feed off the terrestrial insects that fall in from the trees as well. They all like shade, and that's why this is an ideal habitat. This probably doesn't get very much sun at all. And I'm going to do something that I probably shouldn't do, but before I do that, I want to re-emphasize that a habitat is a specific location in an ecosystem in which organisms or communities of organisms live, because they depend on each other for food, etc. The individual organisms or populations of organisms live here because they can find food, shelter, breeding sites and protection from predators, but they are also independent on each other for food themselves. So for example, the kakapo would eat caddisfly larvae, stonefly larvae, but that long-finned eel would eat the kakapo, etc. So to finish this introduction to habitat, etc., I'm going to get out of my bag first some bread, and I'm just going to crunch it up and throw it in there and see if that in fact brings any of the carnivores out. That'd be the first thing. As I said, I also wonder if there are some freshwater crayfish in here as well.